All right, gentle listeners, we're back with Dr. Jim for a special Q&A session. And we always enjoy the questions people send in. We got a mix here from YouTube, email, and Instagram. Mix of philosophy and fitness. Where do we want to start, Jim?
Let's warm up with a fitness question.
Okay. The first question, fitness related, is this. Does weighted pull-up carry over to deadlifting? I want to say not significantly.
Yeah, I've never noticed a bump in my deadlift because of the weight of pull-up, but I'll say this is I've never controlled for that variable.
Yeah.
Like the weighted pull-up, especially when I'm really working on strength, is a staple, big staple for me.
It's a great exercise.
Yeah, and so I don't really know of a time, in at least in recent memory, when I was really working the deadlift when I wasn't working the weighted pull-up.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, whether it helps you deadlift or not, you should be doing weighted
You
pull-ups.
just do them because they're good to do. Yeah, you can see that how it might feel like it's one of those exercises like you can see every now and then it might fill just like a random gap for somebody and you'll see a boost.
Yeah.
But I mean, law of specificity, right? So I think people often like overestimate like the carryover effect a lot of times.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, if you want to get good at something, you just got to freaking do it, right?
Deadlift.
And yeah, if you want to get better at deadlifting, you have to deadlift. Can some things kind of spill or carry over? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I often see people get into this sort of like they're stuck at the thing that they want to get good at, and what they should be doing is like working harder at that thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Or working better.
Yeah, or working better. And they
yeah.
start to rationalize like trying to get around the difficulty, like, oh, you know what, maybe I should do this instead. And then they just go off on this sort of trail of rationalization. They avoid doing the actual thing that would get them better.
Or, when a lot of times I think people, when they do get an accessory lift, I don't even like calling the weighted pull up an accessory lift, but that feels like it has carryover for them. What might make it carry over isn't what they think it is. Because off the top of my head, one of the things I would expect to most help with the deadlift with the weighted pull up is your grip. And I think people underestimate the importance of grip strength in the deadlift, and not just whether you literally keep the bar or not, but just even feeling that thing slide shuts the brain off. It doesn't want to hold on to it anymore. You have a natural reaction to let go of something you can't control. And so it might carry over, but it might not carry over because it's making your back so swole, right? And you might have done better to do some overhand deadlifts more to get your grip whipped up, right? And that would probably have much better carryover to the
yeah. Cool. So worth doing, but not magic.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, next one. All right, well, why don't we just do all the fitness ones?
Sure.
And we'll go into the deeper philosophy ones. We have a request to go down further the rabbit hole of complex design. How do we come up with complexes? How do we build progressions into them, etc.? Okay, so I'll throw something out there and then we can just jump around on it. When I think about complexes, like anything else, I think, what are we trying to get out of it, right? So are we trying to focus on strength or hypertrophy or like trying to do like a metabolic conditioning routine? I think the killer app of complexes is I mean, they're useful for a lot of things, but certainly for the conditioning stuff is where they really shine. So if we're doing that, like general principles just in specific application, right? So a complex is just a string of exercises done back to back with little to no rest in between. If we're trying to do some metabolic effort, we're probably going to be doing, 3 to 5 exercises, maybe more, multiple reps per exercise, and not like a crazy amount of weight. If we're going to be doing strength, probably like 2 to 5 exercises, probably for 5 reps or fewer of each with more weights, and then muscle would be somewhere in between those two, right? That's the kind of like the general structure of how I think about it, Jim. How about you?
Yeah, I am not one to use complexes for strength because when I'm doing strength, I want max tension, I want absolute minimal fatigue, both for progress reasons and safety reasons. So I don't want to be under a press, when my back's maybe a little micro tired from some swings I just did.
Juiced, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, for strength, I won't use complexes. Okay, but everything else you say, yeah, I agree with, right? And not that I'm really disagreeing with you on that. also for me in complex is kind of something, and this is maybe weird gym stuff, is I want flow out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I want it where it there's kind of a rhythm to it, and there's a flow that I can master. So I mean, when I'm doing complexes,
Yes.
it's usually for me part of that whole skills based thing I'm trying to do, or
Yeah,
somewhere between working out and dancing. Yeah.
there's an aesthetic quality you're going for.
Yeah, and that makes me, more into it, and it makes it more fun, and so I tend to, when I really want to get after it and lung burn pump up, I make that more of a circuit than a complex.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas for the complex, I want just a nice swing into a clean, into a push press, where I there's a lot of different movement
It's
and
not
stuff, and it
clunky,
flows.
right? It's kind
Not
of
clunky.
seamless, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
yeah. And when I want to burn in the butter, and that's going to be like a Tabata, or that's going to be uh, some kind of circuit.
Yeah. That's great. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's
Yeah.
that's what you're getting.
Yeah, seriously, there you go. Yeah, you get what you pay for, son.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. We got a bridge to the philosophy questions here. An easy one. What are we currently reading, and what is our current favorite song? Jim, why don't you go first this time?
Current favorite song?
What are you currently reading, and what is your current favorite song?
Oh,
so
man.
take them in whatever order you wish. Good sir.
Okay, so I'm reading some. Okay, so for my teaching right now, I am reading Heidegger's What is Called Thinking, which is maybe one of the most profound books I've read. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading, for another class I'm teaching, I'm reading Leibniz's Discourse on Metaphysics,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a blast from the past because I haven't read that in a lot of years. And I wrote my dissertation on it.
Yeah, your dissertation was Leibniz, right?
Mm-hmm. And my personal stuff, I mentioned in an earlier show, I'm working Schopenhauer, and kind of my nightstand read, my bedtime read is a yeah. No.
Okay.
No. That's definitely like after dinner, after dinner, a cup of coffee read there.
Right.
But yeah, my nightstand read right now is a book by a guy named Graham Hancock called America Before. And Graham Hancock is this. We're gonna get hate mail because people. he's got these like very, very alternative dating of the origin of civilization. That I've kind of gone down a rabbit hole with this guy in the last couple of years. So
that's fun.
It's this big 700-page like Unabomber treatises. Yep. Yeah. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Hey, real quick, what's your This is something I've been asked before. I'd be curious. What is your what are your study habits like? Like when you're really researching, right? How do you program that into your day? You're reading and you're researching. What does that look like?
Yeah. So that for me is when I really get it. Okay. When I just have to get something, I figure it out and learn it and incorporate it. That becomes this sort of all-encompassing
obsession.
Like that's not scheduled. That's that's
nonstop.
Yeah, that's one step from the madhouse.
Right. Yeah. Same way.
And I'll go on these jags, where I'll just get into something and just read book after book after book. And I can hammer through books when I get motivated like that. Right. And so for me, I don't really so when I'm a normal sane person, I have a pretty discipline. I always have, stuff I'm reading for class, and then I have stuff I'm reading for researching, right? And then I have kind of my nightstand read. Always have those going.
Right.
And, that will all be more or less scheduled. I get up first thing in the morning, and part of my morning routine is to review the readings for the class that day, especially something I've read 10 times. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I have time in the afternoon, or later in the morning, depending on what the class schedule is, when I do my research reading. And then the nightstand stuff's just whenever I get that in. Okay. Mm-hmm. But then when the jealous mistress shows up and I just can't put down what I'm trying to get after, right? Then I just I'm on the verge of getting fired, right? Because I'm so obsessing what I'm reading. I'm just
I'm familiar.
Yeah, you get this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have breaks from that, but unfortunately that's more common than not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, current favorite song then I'll answer.
Oh man, current favorite song. It Ain't Like That by Alice in Chains.
Back to 90s. Nice.
Yeah. I mean, I am what I am.
You can't change.
Yeah. I was thinking about you the other day when I was listening to Alice in Chains.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking that Alice in Chains in many ways is it's sort of, it represents kind of this intersection between you and me, because you're sort of an 80s hair band guy. right?
time, big
And I
time.
don't mean that in it. I don't mean that in it. I'm not judging that, right? And, okay,
It is
and
what it is.
but see, I have to say that
I am
as
who I am.
I mean, but as
Right.
like a '90s grunge kid, I have to say I don't mean to judge that, right? Because I'm
Right.
supposed
Right.
to judge that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
Alice in Chains early on, they couldn't quite decide were they
They're a
grunge
bridge.
or
They
they or yeah,
are.
they were a bridge. They were. I've listened to a
Right.
lot of early Alice in Chains while I'm working out lately, and I'm thinking, Flynn would dig this.
I
Flynn
do dig.
could
No,
do
I
this.
do
Yeah,
dig
yeah,
Alice in
yeah,
Chains, right? I do. So I've over the years I've become. I mean, if you were in high school and like when I'm shredding on the guitar, I would have had nothing but contempt for '90s music,
yeah,
right? I've been like,
yeah,
this is what killed everything I love, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
now, but like I've grown out of that, right? Like now
yeah,
it's like no, there's good stuff here, like
yeah,
really good stuff.
yeah.
So you mature,
You were
right?
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Same here. Yeah.
yeah, you
I still
mature. Uh-huh.
the other day I was in the car with my sons and a Greta Van Fleet song came on the radio and I said,
Nice.
"This is what it was like when rock and roll used to be on the radio, boys."
You guys will never know.
Yeah, this is what it used to be like.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like, man, I'm almost 50 years old, aren't I?
right. And I've taken a little bit of heat because I've come out saying I actually like '90s Metallica better than '80s Metallica.
Yeah, I know.
And like you asked me that in high school, I would have punched myself in the gut
Yeah,
if I
yeah,
heard that, right? But it's true.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
where I'm at. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I checked out after Justice for All, and then after you said that, I gotta go check that out. There's something here. Yeah,
There's something because here's my thesis, right? Is that when you first hear Metallica as like a prepubescent male, and it's like the first metal you hear, it's
yeah,
super awesome, right? Like
yeah,
these guys are heavy, they're hard, but then you mature as a musician into
yeah,
metal, and then you get into Megadeth and all these bands that are faster and more technical. That Metallica start to limp, right?
yeah.
They can't really keep up, and
They can't stay there.
they can't stay
Yeah,
there. So then it's like, okay, like now I'm listening to like Dream Theater and all this prog and it's super technical. And like as a musician, it's just like I go back to Metallica and it's like, okay, it's still cool and it's still nostalgic, but I just want more out of it.
yeah,
But when you go to '90s Metallica, well, now they're not really trying to even compete on speed or technicality anymore, right? And you kind of get this like more groovy, more chunky,
yeah,
more melodic in certain ways. So now it's just different,
yeah.
right? So now it's kind of for me, it was like a
So,
category shift,
yeah.
and
So,
that I could really enjoy it without the comparisons to the other thrash or prog metal scene. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, definitely. So Jen and I read this very interesting book, that kind of spooky, weird book by a Oxford biologist, I think he is, uh, named Sheldrake. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the studies he talks about in there is somebody at a university bred rats specifically to see how long it would take them to learn to do a certain maze. And so it took him say 100 times, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then he kills all of them and then breeds another, their offspring. But
Right.
the rats would not have known their parents. Okay, so they didn't learn it from their parents, and he puts them in the maze. And I don't know what the numbers are, but it's like 80 times the second generation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then he does this, wow, that's weird. And he has a third generation, and they get better each generation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now no one quite knows why this is, and but the point being is each generation, whatever we're doing, is going to get better than the prior generation. And so I think for someone like Metallica, they invent speed metal.
Yes.
They invent it. Okay.
Right.
But the next group of rats is going to get better at it than they are.
Perfect.
Because they didn't have to learn what Metallica learned. They had it offloaded
And they just built upon it. Right.
They built upon it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so I think for someone like Metallica, it's either move on or become obsolete.
Right. Uh-huh.
Right. And you see this in stuff like jujitsu, right? Like you look at the stuff that is basic today was advanced, just a generation ago, right? And I think every human phenomenon you can find this is so the next generation will get better at it than the current generation. Next.
Right.
And so if you're still around, you have to move on to something else.
Right.
Or you're just going to become obsolete.
That's spot on.
Yeah.
And it supports my thesis. So I'm going to agree with it, of course. And I mean that, and like, so like, when I was younger, when like Metallica kind of shifted, I would have, I kind of like, hey, 90s Metallica, they're just not the same. But now looking back, I'm like, no, that was a smart move. Because now I listen to songs like Outlaw Torn and Bleeding Me, and like, these are awesome songs, right? And they're slower and they're just chunky. So yeah, man, that's a good parallel.
Yeah.
So 90s music is cool by me now. What am I reading? Have you read this one? Neo-Aristotelian Perspectives on Contemporary Science.
I have not read that one.
So I read a chunk of it before, and I'm going back through the other chunks now just for completion. It's a good book. You know, you got stuff by Koons in here and Proust and other Oderberg and that brand of thinkers. It's good. It's good. That's all I'm going to say about that. My favorite song. I'm back in the '80s hair band scene right now. I'm on a Steel Heart kick, as we were talking about last time.
Nice.
So I'll throw out their song. What the heck is its name? It was a song that was in that we were just talking about, the song that was in the movie Rockstar.
Oh yeah.
Mark Wahlberg is. Yeah,
I was gonna say I just can't forget the Mark.
We All
Wahlberg
Die Young.
lip-sync.
That song. We All Die Young. Yeah, that's it. But there's an original version by Steelheart. The Rockstar one was remade. Go back and listen to the original Steelheart version. It's a little slower, not as high production quality, but a super tune. So I'm going to throw that out there. All right, let's see if we can cram in these last two questions, which will probably be difficult because they're philosophically dense.
That's all right.
We can get a start. All right. Perennial one, Jim. Problem of evil. What do we think are the best responses to the various problems of evil? Also, do we believe in, quote, moral facts? And if so, why? So I guess this gentle listener is asking for a defense from us theists.
Sure.
You want to go first? Or you want me to go?
Yeah. Okay. So problem of evil, interesting thing. So I wrote one of my dissertation advisors was Bill Rowe, who
he's well known on this issue, right?
Pardon me?
He's well known on this issue.
He is well known. Yeah. And, one of the great influences on my life, Bill, he was a really good man to me. God rest his soul. And, he's known as, one of the great, I'm be careful with the word here, with the atheists who exploit the problem of evil, right? So he was the one who came up with basically the inductive version of the problem of evil. Not came up with, but was in a lifelong friendly death struggle with Al Planiga. Right?
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. And those two guys were perfectly friendly. Like Bill Rowe was one of those guys. If you didn't like Bill Rowe, you were the problem. Right. Right. Anyway, and so I wanted to say just
can I just say something real quick? It's amazing, and this is something that I think needs to be understood, is when it comes to a professional level, when it comes to these big things, you often find, not always, but you often find that that's the case, that people with profound worldview disagreements can be just good old chaps, why you don't see that more often on YouTube comments. I just want to put out people who are at the top of their game on this stuff can vigorously disagree, have productive conversation, and go grab a beer. That's the model that people need to be taking for this, right?
Because the silverback gorilla, man, is not threatened, right? By the lesser members of the tribe, right?
Yeah, spot on.
And appreciates the presence of another silverback. Right.
Spot on. So yes, continue with your story. Bill.
Anyway, so I just want to the problem of evil is a near and dear thing to me. Okay. All right. Now, and part of me, I want to say, Job was told, don't respond to it. Job calls out the whirlwind, and the answer he gets is, where the hell were you when I made worlds? Okay. So, I think, I wonder to what degree, at least the Christian version of theism, even tells us to expect a response to the problem of evil.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay. All right. I think there's that kind of like existential concern here. Like, is it even part of the, not the philosophical theism, okay, but like, is it a part of the Christian response to respond to it at all? Okay. And at least it seems biblically, we're told no. Right. And this is, sometime we'll do our Tree of Life talk on the Malik films.
Yes. Soon.
Great moment in that film. There's a woman suffering, having had some just terrible thing happen to her. And there is she calls out, why? And what she gets in reply is a creation story. Like, where were you when I made worlds? Okay. And so, so once again, it doesn't answer an atheist who is using evil as evidence against philosophical theism. Okay.
Right.
But even if there is no way to answer that, does Christianity predict that there would be a way to answer that? And I'm not sure that it does if we take like the example of Job
That's an interesting
Yeah.
move. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting
Okay.
move. Yeah.
Okay. So I have that, okay. And that's kind of where I am in my heart. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Like when I wake up at night and like in the abyss stares back at me, that's, that's where I am. Okay. And I hope we all have that moment. Okay. Right.
If you don't, you're not living, as
You're
far
not
as I'm
living. Yeah.
concerned. Right.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not
We
thinking.
must hold ourselves over the nished, as it's been said. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, but now in terms of philosophical responses, and it's gonna be hard for me to give this because I know what Bill Rowe's gonna say, and I know what you know Stephen Weichster would say, and I know what Bill Rowe would say, and I know what Steve Reich would say, and so we could go back and forth for hours and hours. Okay,
Right.
but there's a guy named Stephen Weichster, and those who are in the know of this problem are saying this is so elementary. Okay, who came up with this notion basically just to ask. So if an atheist says there's more evil in the world than we would expect there to be if God existed, okay, Weichster simply replies, well, how much evil would you expect there to be if God exists? So if you're saying the amount of evil in the world is inconsistent with the existence of God, Weichster's view is that you should be able to specify how much would not be inconsistent with the existence of God.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks that is unanswerable. Okay. Therefore, in his view, there's no argument from evil against the existence of God.
Right. Right. So it's kind of a soft skeptical theism.
Yeah. Okay. And so if you want me, if you drag me into like kind of analytic philosophy, I will go the skeptical theist route.
You're just going to go that route. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Let me think about this, right? Because I think about it in numerous different ways. I was on Matt Fradd's show this weekend, and this came up, and I recommended Eleanor Stump's book, and
Wandering the Darkness.
Right, and
it's a gorgeous book
for the biblical narratives.
Yeah,
but I think you kind of need to read that book once you already have a sort of independent defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I don't think
that's a book. That's a book for the heart, really.
Yeah. That's when the abyss is staring back at you.
That's right. This is how to look back at the abyss, right? My general,
she's pretty open about that too, I think.
She's, and it's just very beautiful, right? With the biblical, especially Job. Just skip to that book on the section of Job, and it ties into what you say. So,
gentle listener, please go read that section of Job.
You need to go right now. It's a thick, huge book. I don't think it's on this shelf. Just skip right to the biblical narrative section and just read that and go shed some tears, even if you're a man, and you will. What I want to say is this, right? If we're talking like evidentially, what worldview, like, and you're talking like either amount of evil or like horrendous evils, or call them mysterious evils, where you don't know exactly what the purpose is.
Gratuitous,
gratuitous, right? Yeah, I like mysterious, because gratuitous is kind of question begging. You know what I'm saying? Like mysterious, so it's called mysterious. What worldview like better kind of predicts or explains that? And I think it's obviously theism, for a couple of reasons, because evil itself is contingent, right? Like it's contingent on certain things. Like to even like assert that something's evil, like we've got some implicit commitment to some type of way things ought to be, a moral standard, if you will, right? But not just that, we need like conscious, rational agents that somehow like connect or link up or can reflect on moral standards and have conversations like these, right? And like evil isn't just some thing by itself, right? It's contingent on other more fundamental realities.
How are you going to make sense of the judgment? There's a moral judgment implicit in the atheist position. How are you going to, you got to have a theory of moral judgment that is consistent with naturalism. And that is famously a long story to tell.
Right. And say it's not even an impossible story to tell. I'll be frank. I think it is an impossible story to tell, but say it's not impossible. Ask, which worldview makes it more probable? Right. And on atheism, on any flavor of atheism, even if you take like try and run it through like a Platonic form, right? I still think it's going to be far, far, far less probable that we would see the moral problem of evil at all, or any problem of evil at all, versus a worldview where we have a perfect foundation, the subsistent good itself. Okay, seems like we got a moral standard there. Would God have reasons to create moral communities? That seems very plausible. And then might God have reasons that there could be evil in creation? So it just seems like on the deeper analysis, the deepest analysis, the data point of evil actually is better explained or more likely or more probable on theism. So I think it points more to theism than atheism on the deepest analysis.
That we're here able to recognize evil as evil, right?
Right. I think, and I think it's superficially, I totally recognize the force, but on the deepest analysis, you realize that evil itself is contingent upon other things that require an explanation. What worldview better explains or predicts that? I'm going to say, in all honesty, like it just seems obviously theism for that. And even if we don't want to say that naturalism can't give any account, just think what's more probable. I think
in one small, I love it. I think it's really cool. And reminds me, and there's something I keep promising I'm going to work on. I keep forgetting to work on, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
I was going to bring that up. I have other responses too.
Yeah, trust me. I will work with this. Right. Sorry.
By the way, what I just said isn't original to me. I'm borrowing that from various other thinkers, right?
Yeah, I make no claim to say anything original ever. So please note there are implicit footnotes always.
Right.
And contact me for the explicit footnotes. One thing this minor worry on that kind of argument is that theistic worldview going to become so plastic that it's not falsifiable, and then it's going to lose any kind of real cognitive traction.
Yeah, we talked about this before off camera, and
so I kind of wonder, so in the same way I'd say the atheist, okay, if you're saying there's too much evil, then you got to be telling, if this is going to be cognitively significant, you got to tell me what would refute that. Okay.
Right.
I want to know, it seems like as a theist, we have to say that maybe there could, if we're going to go the evidential route now.
Right.
It seems like I have to say there would be a line. Right. We're just not there. Or
there's some threshold of extremity.
Yeah.
And there's two ways I would draw that line. There's like what should cause me to admit that I think my hypothesis is wrong, and then like what would cause me. Yeah. Right. And like just as an emotional, fallible being, like I don't know what would cause. Maybe just one of my kids dying could be it, right? Yeah. But in my more rational modes, I realize that shouldn't cause. You know what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So I admit,
or maybe it should be easier for me to be pushed off it too than I am.
Right. Yeah. So in terms of evil, I want to admit that there's got to be some threshold where if it just kept stacking up and and
you've got a possible world where there's just like one burning kitten.
Right. Yeah. And that's it. And that's all. Yeah. Like that, if that was it, right. There's just one burning kitten that somehow.
Gentle listener, we are not going to do this.
Yeah. So no, fully conceded. I don't think that that's this world, but if you really were to push me, that's a good example, right? Yeah. But in terms of like falsifiability, we've talked about this before, even with Christianity, like or Catholicism, right? Like how would I know if I was wrong? And this is a really important. So just kind of shifting from the problem with evil, like, well, if there was a Vatican III and they renounced the Trinity as dogma, it's like I'd be like, okay, the threshold has been crossed. I was wrong. Right?
Whatever is going on is not in continuity anymore. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So no, and that's I'm glad you brought that up. That's a really important question. I haven't thought about what that threshold would be for evil exactly. I definitely want to say there is one.
And I've been thinking about this question, as you know, a lot lately in a number of arenas philosophically. And I don't think I have to be able to say what the line is. I have to be able to say there is some line.
Right. Spot on.
And I hope I would know it when I got there.
Right. And I think that's good. And then I've got this brute fact thing about evil, but we'll save that for another conversation.
But it's cool though.
Yeah. I think it's pretty neat. Yeah. And that one is fairly original, I think. Which means it's probably crap. All right, well, let's do one.
Oh, wasn't there something about moral truths?
Oh, all right, we'll make this the last question because we both got to run. But we'll save there's one about libertarianism. We'll do that on another episode. Yeah. Do we believe in moral facts and why?
Okay, I'm gonna do the classic philosopher. Depends what you mean by moral fact. Okay,
right. All right. It depends.
Yeah, I'm such a dyed-in-the-wool Greek or Aristotelian. Okay, that I'm pretty comfortable saying, look, if what you mean by a moral fact is if human beings never existed, okay, would there be a certain kind of moral fact in the same way that they're mathematical facts or something like that, right? I have no problem saying that moral facts are always conditional on the nature of the beings they apply
on natures, for sure. We're gonna take the same path here.
Yeah, and they're conditional on what would be the good of those natures. Okay. Right. So I think when I say, I ought to do something, I think implicitly there's something built in there. I ought to do it in there because it's ultimately for my good to do it. Right. And now, and I'm not an egoist. I I have a complex theory of human nature that tells me a man alone is a beast or a god. Okay. So my good is the good of other people, right? Of my friends, of my wife, of my children, of my colleagues, and things like that. Okay.
Right. There's a non-competitiveness there.
There's a non-competitiveness there. Okay. And I see the basic ethical unit is not the individual, but groups on which individuals depend. Okay. That might answer the libertarian questions, but
right. Yeah. Actually, you're getting
but if you said, okay, are there moral facts in the way that there are mathematical facts? I don't think there are. Okay. Because I don't think mathematical facts are conditioned on anything. Okay. Whereas I do believe I would prefer ethical, because there's a distinction there. Their ethical facts are always conditioned on the goods available, the good life available to the beings to which they apply.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I would say much indifference to that, actually. You know, like, so, you know, I'm a thoroughgoing Aristotelian myself. And, you know, I go back and forth, right? Like, am I an Aristotelian or Neoplaton? I'm a Thomist broadly.
I don't, at the end of the day, I think we overstate the difference between Plato and Aristotle to the detriment of both.
Have you read Aristotle and Other Platonists?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great book. That's a great book. Anyway, so yeah, like what is good? Well, what kind of thing are we talking about? Right? Right. That we have a certain nature that is oriented towards certain effects or range of effects or ends, right?
Yeah.
And we can achieve those ends or we can fail to achieve those ends. And now the move from God there, which is cool, right? So like, you know, the sort of Aristotelian perspective allows us to do a lot of moral reasoning without like directly like invoking God, right?
Yeah.
But to explain that configuring principle of the substantial form of things, of an essence, right? That we have the sort of formal and the final cause. Well, then it seems like we really do need some type of like mind to make sense of any of that, right? In the background. So I would probably go further than some other Aristotelians would to say that we're going to need to get God in there at some point to make sense of morality, even if we can do a lot of moral work without any initial punting or pointing to God, just to make sense of essentialism, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, Aristotle's pretty clear. You know, he'll say that, you know, God is in there in that, you know, when he sees the ultimate human good is a kind of contemplative life. And the thing that would be most worth contemplating would be would be the first cause. Okay. So, but note that for Aristotle, though, and you could be an Aristotelian and be different. I mean, the historical Aristotle, that God exists is not a premise in a practical syllogism. You know what I mean? It's never like God exists, therefore, you know, I ought to do this, right? But God is the ultimate object of pursuit for Aristotle, right? Right. And it's something, I mean, man, this would be fun to do a show on, actually. Some people miss in Aristotle's first cause argument is the first cause moves the universe because the universe desires the first cause, right? Like the first cause just shows up in its awesomeness and the universe pursues it, right? It's here I am, boys, right? Okay. you know, right? I mean, this is Dante, you know, love makes the world go round.
Yeah. I love it. Let's do it. We need, you know what? Well, let me tease it, because we're going to start at some point, do these Focus Friday episodes. We're just going to focus on a philosopher. And I'd like to focus on many different philosophers across, you know, different traditions. And like really try and focus on like what's really, you know, we can critique them as relevant, but like what are the insights here? Like what's really good about these guys? I love the one we did on Nietzsche. You turned some lights on for me with Nietzsche, and that was awesome.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good. All right, well, let's wrap it up here then. Jim, any final things you want to just announce or mention before we say goodbye?
Hey, if there are any gentle listeners near Auburn University, I will be speaking there on Wednesday. What is that? This coming Wednesday is the 24th.
Indeed.
Right? So Wednesday, the 24th, I will be giving a lecture on Auburn University campus, Neuroscience and the Soul.
Beautiful. Yeah. Right? All right. Well, we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about that like when you get back, so it's still fresh on your mind.
Sure.
Topic.
Sure.
Sweet. All right, guys. Like, subscribe, leave a review. Thanks.